If anyone ever asked me when my life changed course, I wouldn't hesitate. It was the moment Marcus Vale laughed. Not a friendly laugh, not the kind that says, "Good job." It was contempt, sharp and echoing off the glass walls of the 42nd floor conference room at VoltEdge Technologies, a fintech startup valued just shy of $1 billion. I had just finished presenting the final report for a $35 million contract with Atlas Capital, a massive deal powered by the risk prediction algorithm I had built myself. 8 months of work, weekends, countless nights on my personal laptop. Marcus stood, shaking hands with the board, praising the technological breakthrough at VoltEdge. Not once did he mention me. When everyone left, I stayed behind. My pulse was steady, not from excitement, but from injustice. I walked up to the table. "Marcus, can we talk for a minute?" He leaned back in his chair, twirling his Mont Blanc pen. "What's this about, Elena? If it's the report, I think we're clear." "It's about my compensation," I said, taking a slow breath. "I've been here 7 years. That project just brought in record revenue. I think a 15% raise is fair." The pen hit the table. Then came the laugh. "You're serious? 15%? Elena, we just secured new funding and everyone's tightening their belts. What makes you think you're special?" I kept my voice calm. "I think my work speaks for itself. I'm the one who developed the algorithm." "The VoltEdge algorithm," he cut in, emphasizing every word. "Not yours. We pay you to build. You've been paid. Women who crunch data might understand numbers. But profit? That's another story." Laughter flickered from the managers still lingering near the door. My face burned. I swallowed hard. "I don't agree with the way you're talking to me." Marcus stood, towering over me. "Be realistic, Elena. You're good, but no one's irreplaceable. If you want to test your luck elsewhere, be my guest." He turned away like I'd asked for something absurd. I stood frozen, clutching the stack of papers in my hands, pages filled with code, sleepless nights, sacrifices no one would ever see. And in that moment, all of it felt worthless. That afternoon, back in my small office, New York buzzed outside the window. Reflections of headlights shimmered on my computer screen. A company-wide email popped up. "Congratulations to our CEO, Marcus Vale, for securing a $35 partnership with Atlas Capital." Below it, a photo of him shaking hands with the bank's representative. The caption read, "His visionary leadership continues to redefine fintech innovation." I stared at the screen, a lump forming in my throat. His visionary leadership. And me? The one who wrote every line of code, tested every model, stayed until 2 in the morning while he was dining on the Upper East Side? Next to my desk sat a cold cup of coffee and a framed photo of my father, a mechanic who worked 30 years without complaint. He used to tell me, "You don't have to shout to be heard. Just do good work, and people will notice." But I was beginning to realize that wasn't true in this world. By 6 in the evening, most of the office had emptied. I sat alone, opening a folder on my personal laptop labeled Personal Projects. Inside were data logs, notes, and work journals, all time-stamped. I'd even written clearly, "Developed on personal equipment, outside company hours." I didn't know why I'd been so careful back then, maybe instinct. The phone rang. It was Sam, my friend from the dev team. "Elena, you okay?" "I heard Marcus laughed in your face. News travels fast," I said, forcing a smile. "You know VoltEdge," Sam said quietly. "They care about PR, not people. But hey, rumor has it Marcus is prepping for an IPO. He's consolidating every project into VoltEdge's IP portfolio, including your algorithm." I went silent. The puzzle pieces slid into place. If VoltEdge went public, the technology would belong to them forever, and I'd just be a forgotten name in the engineering logs. That night, I walked out when the city was already glowing. The May wind cut through Madison Avenue, sharp and cold, carrying the scent of gas and rain. I ended up in Bryant Park, sitting on a worn wooden bench under the streetlights. I unlocked my phone. One contact stared back at me, a name I'd saved but never called: Daniel Brooks, Director of Strategy at NovaSyn Analytics, VoltEdge's biggest rival. 6 months ago, he'd messaged me, If you ever want to work somewhere that knows your worth, call me. I hovered over the call button, then paused. Not out of fear, but because I knew once I made that call, there'd be no turning back. Marcus had laughed in my face, but I was starting to think that laugh might be the most expensive mistake of his career. I couldn't sleep that night. Marcus's laughter kept echoing in my head, like metal striking metal, cold and hollow. I lay staring at the ceiling of my small Brooklyn apartment, the same place I'd lived for 7 years. My laptop was still open, the blue light washing over the wall, flickering with the city's glow outside. On the screen, the folder Personal Projects remained open. Lines of code, notes, and detailed documentation of the algorithm I had written. I remembered my first interview at VoltEdge, 7 years ago. Back then, Marcus wasn't yet the CEO. He was a young co-founder with charm and eyes that knew how to make people believe in him. He said, "VoltEdge isn't for people who want comfort. We build what will define the future of finance." I believed him. I believed in the dream of changing the world through technology. The early days were incredible. We were a small team, working late, eating pizza over keyboards, laughing at stupid coding errors. Then VoltEdge started to grow, and so did Marcus's ego. The change began in small ways. Meetings where only the senior male leads were invited. Articles praising the all-male founding team. Times when I shared an idea, only to hear Marcus present the exact same one a week later and receive applause. I learned to stay quiet, to pick my moments, to work efficiently without drawing attention. 3 years later, when VoltEdge landed its first major funding from Morganfield Capital, Marcus officially became CEO. That's when he started forgetting that people like us even existed behind the growth charts. One afternoon, I brought him a progress report on my algorithm. He glanced at it and said, "Good, but let Tom present it to the board. You know investors feel more confident hearing a voice with a little more authority." I knew what a little more authority meant. It meant male. I stayed silent. That time and many times after. But my silence wasn't weakness. It was faith. Faith that hard work would eventually be seen. I believed my father's words. You just need to be good, not loud. Until the day Marcus turned my work into VoltEdge's breakthrough on live television. I remember that morning clearly. CNBC broadcast it live. Marcus in a navy suit, standing on the stage at TEDx FinTech. Our algorithm has reduced enterprise financial risk by 40%. This is a leap forward for VoltEdge and for the future. I sat in my office watching, my coffee trembling in my hand. Our algorithm. Not once did he say, "Elena." Sam walked in quietly. "You have to do something." I just said, "It's fine, as long as it helps the company grow." That was a lie. In the months that followed, Marcus became unbearable. He moved into a private glass office overlooking the engineering floor, like a king watching his workers toil. I started keeping records. Every email, draft, schedule, every proposal I'd submitted and been denied. Didn't know why. Just a feeling that one day I'd need them. Then came the Atlas Capital project. At first, no one thought it would succeed. A major bank partnering with a small startup? Unlikely. But I had an idea, a real-time behavioral risk prediction system. I spent weeks building the algorithm, testing thousands of data combinations. Marcus barely understood how it worked, but he knew how to sell it. When the $35 million contract was signed, he said, "Good work, Elena. You're a valuable asset to VoltEdge." Now I understand. Valuable asset wasn't a compliment, it was ownership. A week after that humiliating meeting, Sam sent me a confidential file, the internal IP registry for VoltEdge's upcoming IPO. I opened it, my pulse racing. Under the section titled Key Proprietary Algorithms, it read, "Predictive Risk Engine, developed under the supervision of CEO Marcus Vail." No mention of me. Not a single trace of my existence in the project. It felt like someone had stolen my memories. That night, I called Sam. "Are you sure this file is real?" "It's the original, pulled from the internal server. Marcus is consolidating everything before the investor meetings. I'm not letting this slide." "Elena," Sam sighed. "I know you. But be careful. Marcus isn't just a CEO. He's wired deep into the investor network. If you go after him, you'll be crushed. I smiled for the first time in days. Maybe it's time I learned to breathe somewhere else. The next morning, I walked into VoltEdge with a different kind of calm. I wasn't the quiet engineer anymore. I was preparing to leave, but not to run, to strike. I reopened the personal projects folder and backed up every file to an external drive. Every note, every timestamp, every log, proof that I had built the system off company time, on personal equipment, under my own account. And for the first time, instead of fear, I felt something else. A spark of confidence. Marcus could laugh all he wanted, but he wouldn't be laughing for long. I never thought the random notes I scribbled could end up saving me, but as I sat in a small cafe in Lower Manhattan, staring at the line on my laptop screen, developed independently, using personal resources, outside company hours, I knew everything had changed. I wasn't just a technical employee of VoltEdge anymore. I was the owner of the very thing that made that company explode. That morning, I met with Rachel Kim, an intellectual property attorney Sam had recommended. She was petite, sharp, and spoke fast, each word cutting like a blade. After I explained everything, Rachel leaned back in her chair, fingers laced together. Elena, if all this data is real, the timestamps, system logs, original files on your personal device, then legally, VoltEdge has no ownership claim. But what? I asked. They can fight back. Startups often blur the line between personal assets and company contributions. If Marcus is smart, he'll try to prove you used VoltEdge resources or worked on it during office hours. I took a deep breath. I can prove otherwise. Every record was created on my personal computer. I worked from home on weekends. Rachel nodded. Good. Then here's my advice. Stay quiet. Don't tell anyone you've spoken to me, and start backing up everything you have. The next few weeks felt like walking a tightrope. By day, I went to work as usual, making coffee, joining meetings, writing code. By night, I quietly copied every file, saving every email that proved Marcus had refused to purchase my technology 3 years earlier. There was one email thread I could never forget. I'd sent Marcus the first outline of my algorithm, suggesting VoltEdge could buy the rights officially. His reply had been short. We don't need the paperwork. Just deploy it. We'll handle the rest later. We'll handle it later, I smiled bitterly. Later, he'd planned to erase me. Then the day I'd been dreading arrived. On a Friday afternoon, Marcus called the whole team into an emergency meeting. He was grinning, espresso cup in hand. Good news, everyone. Atlas Capital wants to expand the deal by $10 million. They're rolling out our algorithm across their entire network. This is a huge step for VoltEdge. Applause filled the room. I clapped too, but my hands were cold. Our algorithm? No, Marcus. Mine. Watching him stand there talking about the future of technology, it hit me. Marcus wasn't just a credit thief. He was a legalized thief, protected by the title of CEO. That night, I didn't go home. I stayed late in the office, the only light coming from my monitor, the rain tapping against the glass. I opened a new document titled Exit Plan. I listed each step. Complete all personal data backups. Meet Rachel to finalize IP documentation. Find a new destination. I scrolled through my contacts. Daniel Brooks's name appeared again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I hit call. Daniel. Brooks speaking. It's Elena Torres, VoltEdge. There was a pause. Then his tone softened. Surprised but pleased. Elena, I've been waiting for this call. We agreed to meet the next day at a restaurant near Central Park. That night, I barely slept. Marcus's words kept looping in my mind. No one is irreplaceable. I was going to prove him wrong, not with words, but with action. The next day, I walked into the restaurant under warm yellow lights and the sound of jazz. Daniel was already there, in a crisp white shirt, calm and composed. I heard you just helped VoltEdge land their biggest deal, he said, smiling. Though it seems they forgot to mention your name. I smiled faintly. You know quite a lot. I've followed VoltEdge for years, but what interests me isn't the company, it's you. I looked up. His tone was sincere enough to make me slightly uncomfortable. I want you to lead our applied AI division at Novasyn, triple your current salary, full equity, and most importantly, your name on every invention you create. I paused for a few seconds. What if I bring my system with me? Daniel tilted his head slightly. As long as you can prove it's your personal work, Novasyn will buy the rights legally. We don't steal from our engineers. We invest in them. That sentence made me feel something I hadn't felt in years: respect. That night, I walked through Central Park. The rain had stopped. The leaves glistened under the streetlights. I paused by the lake and texted Sam. I'm leaving VoltEdge. Don't tell anyone. I'll explain everything once it's done. He replied almost instantly. Do what you need to do. I've got your back. I took a deep breath. The post-rain air in New York was cold, but my chest felt warm. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't waiting for recognition. I was choosing my own direction. The next morning, as I walked into VoltEdge, I knew everything had shifted. Marcus was still there, laughing like the world revolved around him. But he didn't look powerful anymore. He just looked like a man who had forgotten that loyalty has limits, and once those limits break, all that's left is resistance. 3 days later, I stood in front of Novasyn Analytics' glass tower in the heart of Manhattan. The building looked cold from the outside, but the moment I walked through those glass doors, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: air. The kind you breathe freely after holding it in for too long. No judgmental looks, no half smiles of mockery, like at VoltEdge, just the sound of keyboards, quiet conversations about code and systems, and eyes that lit up with genuine curiosity for the future. Daniel Brooks met me in the lobby and led me upstairs to the 35th floor. He wore a white shirt, no tie, and a paper cup of coffee in hand. His office was bright, filled with sunlight and whiteboards covered in equations. Thank you for coming, Elena, he said, his voice calm but sharp beneath the surface. I nodded and sat across from him. I think it's time I heard your offer. He leaned back slightly, studying me before speaking. Marcus Vale doesn't realize he just lost his most valuable asset. I frowned. I'm not here to get revenge on Marcus. I just want recognition, and to work somewhere that values what I do. Daniel nodded. That's the best reason to start over, but I won't pretend I don't have my own motives. Novasyn lost 3 major contracts to VoltEdge this year. I want them back, and I believe you're the one who can help me do it. I smiled faintly. You make it sound easy. It's not, he said quickly, but it's worth it. After the meeting, Daniel showed me around the office. The atmosphere was completely different from VoltEdge: open, collaborative, human. A short-haired woman stopped by, smiling brightly. You're Elena Torres, right? She asked, shaking my hand. I read your paper on risk behavior in financial data. Thank you. It helped me pass my thesis review. I laughed softly, caught off guard. Really? I didn't think anyone still read that. Daniel smiled beside me and said quietly, Here, we always say the names of the people who make things happen. A good idea deserves its rightful owner. I replied, almost under my breath. It's such a simple thing, yet so rare elsewhere. At lunch near Bryant Park, Daniel talked about Novasyn's values. Profit, yes, but also transparency and integrity. He set down his coffee, his tone shifting. Elena, I want you to lead Project Sentinel. It's our AI fraud detection system in development. I've reviewed your record. If you do for Novasyn what you did for VoltEdge, we'll rewrite the rules of this industry. I leaned back. Aren't you worried I'll bring trouble? Marcus could sue me for trade secrets. Daniel shrugged, his voice low and steady. I've thought about that. We're not taking anything from VoltEdge. We'll buy your personal IP legally, clean and clear. If Marcus files a lawsuit, he'll expose his own misconduct. I narrowed my eyes slightly. You sound like you've been waiting for this, he laughed. I used to work for Marcus 4 years before I left to found Novasyn. I know him better than anyone. The price of arrogance is blindness. I nodded quietly. Looks like we have something in common. More than one thing, he said. We both know what it feels like to be underestimated. For the first time, I felt understood. No explanations. No justifications, just understanding. That afternoon, Rachel, my attorney, met me at Novasin's office to review the contract. She read every clause carefully, then looked up. "This is the first company I've seen that allows employees to co-own their patents," she said. "Daniel Brooks isn't like other CEOs." "I know," I replied. "He's not Marcus, and maybe that's why I trust him." Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Trust him, but don't relax. Marcus won't let you walk away quietly. Be ready." "I am," I said, completely. That night, I left the Nova Sin building just as the city lights flickered on. It had started to drizzle. The streetlights shimmered across the wet pavement. My phone buzzed. Daniel had texted me, "Thank you for trusting me, Elena. Together, we'll make them listen." I stood under a tree, reading those words as warmth spread through my chest. The man who once made me invisible was now just a shadow behind me. Ahead lay something new. Not just recognition, but reclamation. 2 weeks later, I submitted my resignation at VoltEdge. When I walked into Marcus's office, he looked up from his screen, frowning. "You're joking, right, Elena?" he snapped. "Right when we're about to expand the Atlas contract, you're walking out?" "I'm not joking, Marcus," I said evenly. "I've signed with Nova Sin. They want me to lead Project Sentinel." He scoffed, leaning back in his chair. "Nova Sin? They're using you to hit me. You think they actually care about you?" "I don't care if they care about you," I replied, meeting his eyes. "I care that they respect me." Marcus tapped his fingers on the desk, his tone dropping. "You're destroying your career, Elena. No one out there even remembers your name." I smiled softly. "Then I'll make sure they do." I stood, placing the resignation letter on his desk. "Thank you for helping me understand my worth, by denying it." I turned to leave. Behind me, his voice cut through the air, cold and sharp. "You'll regret this." I didn't look back. "No, Marcus, I've regretted enough already." As I stepped out of VoltEdge for the last time, the rain finally came down in earnest. Cold, steady, cleansing. Each drop felt like it was washing away the years I'd spent being diminished. I knew this was only the beginning. There would be storms ahead, lawsuits, retaliation, whispered threats. But now I had allies, evidence, and something far stronger than anger, belief. For the first time in 7 years, I wasn't walking in fear. I was walking to reclaim the right to exist in my own story. The news of my resignation spread faster than I expected. Within 2 days, everyone at VoltEdge was whispering. Some sent quick messages, "Congrats, Elena." Others looked at me as if I'd just betrayed the country. That morning, just as I stepped into the building, an email arrived from HR. Emergency meeting with the CEO and legal department. 10 Huntic a.m. I'd known this would happen. I just didn't think it would come so soon. When I entered the conference room, Marcus was already there, along with Vera from HR and Collins, the company's in-house counsel. The air felt heavy. Marcus spoke first. "Do you realize, Elena, how much damage your departure causes VoltEdge at this stage?" I sat down, keeping my voice calm. "I've completed every project assigned to me. I'm simply exercising my legal right to resign." He gave a cold smile. "Your legal right? You do understand we're in the middle of contract expansion talks with Atlas Capital, yes? You're a key resource. Walking out now looks highly unethical." "Ethical duty doesn't mean accepting disrespect," I replied. Vera stepped in, her tone soft but dripping with manipulation. "Elena, we understand how you feel, but Marcus is just trying to find a way to keep you. You're an important part of VoltEdge. Maybe if we renegotiate your salary—" "No, thank you," I interrupted. "I'm not coming back. I just want to complete the offboarding process." That's when Collins, who'd been silent, opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "Before you leave, the company requires you to sign a supplemental non-compete agreement. It's standard procedure to protect VoltEdge's intellectual property." I looked at him, then at Marcus. "There was no such clause in my original contract 7 years ago. I'm not signing." Marcus crossed his arms and smirked. "You don't have a choice." "I think I do," I said, reaching into my bag and pulling out a thick file. This contains records proving I developed the predictive risk algorithms on personal equipment, outside company hours, using independent data sources. Legally, VoltEdge doesn't own them. Vera glanced at Collins, and Marcus raised an eyebrow. Collins flipped through a few pages, his expression shifting. You logged every date, every timestamp? He asked. I'm a data analyst, I said quietly. Recording everything is second nature. Marcus's voice sharpened. That system is the backbone of VoltEdge. You can't just claim it's a personal project. I'm not claiming anything, I'm proving it. I pointed to the file. I also have the 3-year-old email chain where I proposed a buyout of the license. You replied, just implement it, we'll handle the details later. No transfer agreement was ever signed. Would you like me to forward those emails to the press? The room fell silent. Marcus's face flushed red. Collins sat upright, clearing his throat. Marcus, if what she says is true, we have no grounds to force a non-compete. Whose side are you on? Marcus snapped. The side of the law, sir, Collins said, tense but steady. I stood. If there's nothing else, I'll finish my handover and leave. My last working day is Friday. Marcus jabbed a finger toward me. You'll regret defying me, Elena. I made your career, and I can erase it from this industry just as easily. I held his gaze, speaking slowly. Maybe. But remember, I tried to leave in peace. You're the one turning it into a battlefield. I turned and walked out. The door closed behind me, but I could still hear the sound of Marcus slamming his hand against the table. The next 3 days passed in uneasy quiet. A few colleagues stopped by my desk with quiet goodbyes. Sam messaged me. Be careful. Marcus is telling reporters you stole company data. I closed my eyes and exhaled. I'd expected this move. That night, I sent Rachel, my attorney, copies of every email, every development log, every version of my old contract. She replied, Don't worry, they're panicking. Let me handle the legal side. You focus on Nova Sin. My final day arrived. I came in early, cleared my desk, shut down the computer I'd sat in front of for 7 years. Everything looked strangely small. I looked around. The office that had once been my whole world now felt like a cold echo of itself. Around noon, Collins stopped by with an envelope. The company needs your signature on the final clearance form, he said, his tone softer than usual. After I signed, he hesitated for a moment, then said quietly, Elena, for what it's worth, I admire you. I've seen Marcus crush people, but no one ever stood up to him. You did the right thing. I smiled faintly. I just did what I should have done a long time ago. When I walked out of VoltEdge for the last time, it was 5:17 in the evening. The sky was clear, but the wind was cold. I stood at the exit, looking at my reflection in the glass, no longer the woman who used to bow her head. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. Dinner at Le Jardin, 7 p.m. Don't be late, we have a lot to discuss. I laughed quietly. 7 years spent working for a man who refused to see my worth. And now I was stepping into a place where that worth finally had a name. I turned, walking into the flow of the crowd, feeling light, as if I'd just cut the invisible wire that had been tightening around my neck for years. I didn't know what the future would bring, but I knew one thing for sure. Marcus Vale wouldn't be laughing for much longer. On my first day at Novasin Analytics, I arrived 2 hours early. Not because I was nervous, but because I was excited. I wanted to see the place where I would rebuild everything, from the ground up, on my own terms. My new office was on the 28th floor, facing the Hudson River. Morning light spilled through the glass walls, warm and clear. I stood there, fingertips resting on the edge of the oak desk, and took a deep breath. 7 years trapped inside VoltEdge's box, and now, finally, I could see the sky. Daniel knocked on the door, walking in with that familiar smile. Welcome to freedom, he said, setting a steaming cup of coffee on my desk. Thank you. You remembered I prefer lattes over espresso. People don't forget the important things, he replied. We toured the office together, open floor, no hierarchy, no glass cages of power. This is your team, Daniel said. 8 people, mostly young engineers, excited to work with you. I looked at them, new faces, bright eyes. "Hi, everyone," I said, hiding the small tremor in my voice. "I'm Elena, and we're not just here to write code. We're here to change the way the world understands financial data." No one laughed. They nodded, eyes full of belief. In that moment, I felt trust take root. We began building Sentinel, the AI fraud prevention system I had dreamed of for years, a tool that didn't just detect fraud, but learned from patterns to stop it before it happened. For the first 3 weeks, I practically lived at the office. Coffee, sandwiches, and long nights coding until 2 in the morning. Daniel would stop by occasionally just to ask, "Need anything?" And I'd always answer, "More time." By week 4, our first prototype went live. When the results flashed on the screen, 96% accuracy in detecting risky transactions, the room erupted. One of the young engineers shouted, "We did it, Elena!" I smiled. "Not me, us." That night, we celebrated at a rooftop bar near the office. I looked around. Wind, laughter, city lights, and realized something simple and profound. I was living the life I was always meant to have. 3 months later, Sentinel was presented to Novacin's investment board. Daniel insisted I give the presentation. I walked onto the stage, my hands steady this time. "I'm not here to talk about numbers," I began, "but about people. Sentinel isn't just a tool, it's Novacin's promise, transparency, fairness, and trust." The room burst into applause. A week later, Novacin signed a $20 million deal with Atlas Capital, the same client VoltEdge once claimed as their crown jewel. Marcus heard the news within hours. The next day, my name appeared on the front page of Tech Finance Daily. Novacin overtakes VoltEdge with breakthrough AI fraud system. Behind the innovation, Elena Torres, former lead analyst at VoltEdge. I'd barely set the paper down when my phone rang. It was, "Rachel." "Elena, Marcus just filed a lawsuit, intellectual property infringement." I sighed, but my pulse stayed calm. I figured it was only a matter of time. "Your company's legal team will handle it, but be ready, they'll go to the media." And they did. 3 days later, VoltEdge released a statement accusing me of stealing trade secrets. A few smaller outlets picked it up with headlines like, "The betrayal of a data scientist, from model employee to tech thief?" Sam texted me, "Ignore it. Everyone at VoltEdge knows Marcus is bluffing. He's just scared of what you've built." I replied, "He's not scared of me. He's scared of the truth." Novacin moved fast. Daniel called a press conference. I didn't speak. He did. I sat behind him, watching as he faced the cameras. "We have not used any intellectual property belonging to VoltEdge," he said evenly. "All algorithms were developed independently by Novacin's team, led by Elena Torres, and we have documentation to prove it." His voice was calm, decisive. No shouting, no blame, just truth. When it was over, he turned to me. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though my heart was still racing. "It's just strange to see someone else stand up for me." He smiled. "You already did. I'm just following your lead." The lawsuit shook the tech world. Experts came forward, calling it a landmark case for individual IP rights in the age of AI. Women in tech started sharing my story online, calling me the quiet rebellion. I didn't give interviews. I just kept working. Because beneath all the noise, one thing mattered. Sentinel was working. Within 2 weeks, it had reduced fraudulent transactions by 28% for its first client. Novacin became the hottest name on Wall Street. Then, one late night, a text appeared from an unknown number. "You think you've won? The game's just begun. M. Marcus." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. No reaction, no fear. Because I wasn't that trembling woman in the glass conference room anymore. I was Elena Torres, and I had turned my fear into a weapon. 3 months later, Novacin announced a 60% revenue increase and reclaimed 15% of VoltEdge's market share. The board promoted me to Director of Strategic AI. At the quarterly meeting, Daniel addressed the entire company. "Sentinel isn't just a successful project," he said. "It's proof of what Novacin stands for. Here, no one is invisible. The room erupted in applause. As they turned toward me, I spoke softly, just loud enough for the mic to catch it. No one is invisible, unless they choose to be. 3 months after VoltEdge filed its lawsuit, VoltEdge Technologies versus Elena Torres was officially taken up by the federal court in Manhattan. The media called it the tech trial of the year. To me, it was simply the day the truth finally got to speak. On the morning of the first hearing, Rachel, my attorney, rested a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "Elena, you don't have to say much today. Let your evidence speak for you." I nodded, though my heart was pounding. Across the aisle, Marcus walked in with his legal army. He wore a black suit, his expression smug, his eyes cold when they met mine. When the session began, VoltEdge's lead attorney stood to address the court. "Your Honor, our client, VoltEdge Technologies, accuses the defendant, Ms. Elena Torres, of stealing proprietary trade secrets, specifically the core algorithms of the company's risk management system, causing substantial financial and reputational damage." Marcus sat motionless, face blank, but I knew he was savoring every word. Then Rachel rose. Her tone was calm, her words sharp as glass. "Your Honor, VoltEdge deliberately exploited Ms. Torres's independently developed work without any licensing agreement or acknowledgement of intellectual property rights. We have documentation, system logs, development journals, and email records proving it." She placed a thick folder of exhibits on the table, then turned toward me. "Elena, would you please explain your development process to the court?" I stood, took a deep breath. "I built the predictive risk algorithm on my personal laptop at home, outside office hours. All data was created using my personal accounts, with no connection to VoltEdge's infrastructure. I also proposed a licensing agreement to the company, but CEO Marcus Vale rejected it." Rachel asked, "Do you have proof of that proposal?" "Yes," I said. An email from Marcus Vale dated March 17th, 2020. On the courtroom screen, the line appeared clearly. "Just implement it if it works. We'll figure out the details later." A wave of murmurs rippled through the gallery. The judge looked up at Marcus. "Mr. Vale, do you confirm this is your email?" Marcus clenched his jaw. "Yes, but the context was taken out of proportion." Rachel smiled. "Your Honor, we have the full email thread." The next slide appeared, showing that I had twice asked for clarification of ownership, and VoltEdge had ignored both requests. Marcus's team began to falter. On day 2, VoltEdge's lawyers tried a new angle. "Ms. Torres," one asked, "did you ever send test files from your company email?" "I did," I answered. "For backup only. The data wasn't proprietary." Rachel rose immediately. "Your Honor, transmitting a duplicate does not equate to using company resources. In fact, all timestamps on the original source code align with non-working hours." The judge nodded, allowing the testimony to continue. When it was Marcus's turn to testify, Rachel went straight for the pressure point. "Mr. Vale, does VoltEdge have an internal process for acquiring employee-owned intellectual property?" "Yes," he said curtly. "Did you follow that process with Ms. Torres's work?" "We didn't think it was necessary. She was an employee." "So you intentionally disregarded your own compliance policy, correct?" Marcus fell silent. The courtroom did too. That afternoon, reporters packed the hallway. One shouted, "Elena, do you see this as revenge against your former company?" I smiled faintly. "I'm not out for revenge. I'm protecting what's mine." On day 4, Rachel presented the final piece of evidence: programming logs with timestamps and GPS data from my personal computer. "Your Honor," she said, "this work cannot legally be considered VoltEdge property. Ms. Torres acted entirely independently." VoltEdge's lawyers had no rebuttal left. Marcus stared down at the papers, eyes vacant. 2 weeks later, the court delivered its verdict. The judge's voice was steady and clear. "Based on the evidence presented, this court concludes that VoltEdge Technologies holds no ownership claim over the algorithm developed by Elena Torres. The case is dismissed. Furthermore, VoltEdge shows signs of copyright infringement and unlawful exploitation of intellectual property." The courtroom erupted. I sat still for a moment, my pulse frozen. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. You won! The next day, headlines flooded every platform. Elena Torres wins landmark case. VoltEdge stock plunges 62%. A costly lesson in leadership arrogance. Tech journals, financial papers, and even feminist magazines ran my name. CNN called it the Rosa Parks moment of the tech industry. But I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt free. At last, I didn't have to prove what I'd always known, that worth isn't tied to a title. It's earned by the work itself. A few days later, Sam called. Did you see the news? Marcus just resigned. The board's investigating him for IPO fraud. I was quiet for a moment. I don't want anyone to lose their job. You didn't cause it, Elena, Sam said. You just pulled the curtain back. That night, I sat alone in my Nova Sin office, looking out over the city. The lights below still shimmered, as if no one had just survived a war. Daniel walked in and set a newspaper on my desk. On the cover was a photo of me outside the courthouse, headline bold across the page, "The Woman Who Changed the Rules of Tech." I laughed softly. Sounds like a movie. Daniel smiled. Sometimes justice knows how to tell a good story. At the end of the quarter, Novasin announced record-breaking revenue, claiming another 20% of VoltEdge's market share. During the press conference, Daniel said, "We don't celebrate a rival's downfall. We celebrate that truth held its ground." I sat in the back row, smiling quietly, because I knew my fight was never about winning. It was about never having to bow again. The trial was over. The articles were everywhere. My phone had gone silent after a storm of congratulations. That night, I stayed late in the Nova Sin office, lights off except for the faint glow from my monitor. The city below still glittered, as if no battle had ever been fought. I opened my email. Hundreds of messages, congratulations, invitations to speak, offers for primetime interviews. I placed my hands on the keyboard, then stopped. I didn't want to tell my story again. I had already told it, under oath. The door opened softly. Daniel stood there, holding 2 cups of hot tea. "Long day," he said, walking in. I smiled faintly. "Longer than a fiscal quarter." He sat across from me, eyes gentle. "You did well, Elena." I looked out the window. "I won, so why doesn't it feel like victory?" He paused. "Who are you thinking about?" "The people at VoltEdge," I said quietly. "The ones who lost their jobs because of Marcus's decisions." My phone buzzed. A message from Sam. "Elena, 120 layoffs just announced. First round." I set the phone down, a weight settling in my chest. Daniel spoke softly. "You're not responsible for the choices of a CEO." "No," I said, "but I'm responsible for the choices of a human being. And that human being is me." 2 days later, as I was reviewing Sentinel's latest rollout report, I got a call from reception. "There's someone here to see you. She says she used to work at VoltEdge." "What's her name?" "Carla Nguyen, risk control lead." Carla walked in thinner than I remembered, her eyes tired. We'd worked on a project together 2 years ago. She used to laugh easily. Not today. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, sitting down. "I'm glad you came," I said. "How are you holding up?" She shook her head. "I was just laid off, my entire team, 37 people. I didn't come to ask for a job. I came to ask, was it worth it?" I hesitated. "Carla, I didn't destroy VoltEdge. I just defended what was mine." "And people like me," she asked quietly, "we did our jobs, worked hard, and now we have nothing. You got applause on stage. We got envelopes." Her tone wasn't bitter, just exhausted. I nodded, my throat tight. "You're right. I won. But others paid a price for it. I never wanted that." Carla looked around the bright, spotless office, then back at me. "If you didn't want it, what will you do about it?" The question hung in the air, heavy. I stood, opened my laptop, and created a new spreadsheet. "I'll do what I do best. Build a system to fix what another system broke." Carla frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" "I'm creating a program for displaced VoltEdge employees. priority hiring, retraining, career transition, partnerships with our network. I'm calling it Rise Again. Carla studied me for a long moment. You think you can pull that off? I don't know, I said honestly, but I'll try, and I'll do it right. That afternoon, I brought the proposal to Daniel's office. He was sketching data flow charts for Sentinel 2.0 on the whiteboard. I need 15 minutes, I said, setting my laptop on his desk. He turned, smiled. You've got an hour. Operation Rise Again, I began. Goal: interview qualified VoltEdge employees, provide 8 weeks of AI and analytics training, resume workshops, career counseling, and part-time consulting for retirees. Daniel crossed his arms. Cost: estimated $2.8 million for 6 months. Training funds, scholarships and advisory staff, a dedicated recruiting platform, and transparent communications budget. Return on investment: faster hiring as NovaSyn scales, stronger CSR reputation, access to industry-trained talent, and most importantly, living up to what we say we believe. He was quiet, then asked, "Why now?" Because I need it now, I said. I don't want my victory built on someone else's collapse. He looked at me, admiration clear in his eyes. All right, draft the full proposal. I'll bring it to the board this week. I need one more thing, I added. What's that? Final say on recruitment decisions. I want to make sure this doesn't turn into a PR stunt. Daniel smiled. You already have it. 3 weeks later, Rise Again launched. We opened a dedicated application portal, hosted a career event in a Queens community center, and partnered with 3 training firms for short courses. I stood on a small stage, no fancy backdrop, just a microphone and a simple banner. My name is Elena Torres, I began. I'm not here to tell a victory story. I'm here to take responsibility. If you once worked with me, know this. This door is open because you deserve it. A man raised his hand. Are you sure this isn't just NovaSyn's way of hiring cheap talent? I'll answer that directly, I said. Salaries will match the market rate, and if we can't hire everyone, we'll still cover all training costs. No strings attached. The room murmured. I caught Carla's face in the crowd. This time she was smiling. By the end of week 1, 476 applications came in. We built an accelerated review team, interviewing late into the evenings. 3 weeks later, NovaSyn hired 57 former VoltEdge employees. Each time a new contract was signed, I asked HR to send a thank you note, not to me, but to them, for enduring and staying resilient through the storm. One late afternoon, as I reviewed the applicant list, a receptionist called again. There's someone here to see you. His name is Marcus Vale. I straightened. Send him up. The door opened. Marcus entered, thinner, his gray suit hanging loose. His eyes scanned the office before settling on me. I didn't think you'd see me, he said. I didn't think you'd come, I replied, gesturing toward the chair. Have a seat. He didn't. I came to say 3 things, he began, voice tired. First, I'm sorry. I said nothing. Second, VoltEdge is filing for bankruptcy. More people will lose their jobs. I heard about your program. If you can, take a few more. We've taken as many as we can, I said, but we'll open another training round. Marcus nodded, eyes red. Third, he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket and placing it on my desk. It's a printout of an article. I underlined one sentence. I think you should keep it. He turned and left. The door closed behind him. I opened the envelope. Inside was a long analysis from the Wall Street Journal about VoltEdge's fall and NovaSyn's rise. The sentence he'd marked in red read, in the end, what destroyed VoltEdge wasn't the competitor's technology. It was how they treated people. I set the paper down, my chest heavy and light all at once. No victory is perfect. But some victories are right. That night, I stayed late again. Carla knocked on my door. Good news, she said, smiling like she used to. We finalized part-time consulting contracts for 20 senior employees. They'll help train the new batch. I stood and hugged her. Thank you, Carla, she laughed. Thank the boss. I don't like that word, I said. Then how about the one who opened the door? I smiled. Better. We stood by the window, watching the city glow. Carla, I said softly, you once asked me if it was worth it. I still don't have a perfect answer, but I'll keep working until the answer is as close to worth it as I can make it. She nodded. That's enough. At the next quarterly meeting, Daniel stood before the company. Revenue's up 18% above projections, he said. But the most important number today isn't profit. It's 173, the number of former VoltEdge employees now working again, either at NovaSyn or through Rise Again partnerships. The room rose in applause. My eyes stung. Daniel looked toward me, and that happened because one person chose to rebuild even after winning. After the meeting, I sat at my desk and drafted a new email. Subject: Mentorship, Women in Tech. Body: Our first session starts next month. Topic number 1: Salary negotiation and protecting your intellectual property. I hit send. Outside the window, the Hudson shimmered under the nightlights. For the first time in years, I heard something I hadn't in a long time: peace. I left the office at 9:12 p.m. In the lobby, the Rise Again poster hung slightly crooked. I stopped to straighten it. Small things deserve to be done right. My phone buzzed once more, a text from an unsaved number. Thank you for doing what I should have done. M. I stood still for a moment, then slipped the phone into my pocket and stepped into the night. The river wind was cold against my skin, but I smiled. Not because I had won, but because at last I had become the kind of person I wanted to believe in. A year after the trial, I stood on stage at the International FinTech Conference in Boston. The room was silent. More than 3,000 people sat below: engineers, executives, students, investors. Behind me, a single line filled the screen: From loyalty to leadership. I smiled, looked around, and began. 12 years ago, I sat in a glass office, begging for a 10% raise. They laughed at me. Today, I'm standing here to tell you this: no one gets to decide your worth, except you. Applause rippled through the room, scattered at first, then rising like a wave. I took a deep breath and went on. Sometimes, justice doesn't come from the courtroom. It comes from the moment you decide to stand up. I'm not here to talk about revenge. I'm here to talk about rebirth. When I finished, the audience rose to their feet. I bowed, not in triumph, but in peace, the kind that only comes after you've walked through hell and made it out whole. 3 days later, I was back in New York. The NovaSyn office looked different, larger, louder, but the heart of it was unchanged. The main lobby wall now displayed portraits of our people: engineers, mentors, former VoltEdge staff, the forgotten faces now shining again. Above them, the words I'd chosen: Innovation begins with recognition. Daniel was waiting in the conference room. Your Boston speech went viral, he said with a grin. 3 million views in 48 hours. You've officially become a symbol for women in tech. I laughed. I just told my story. Yes, he said, but you told it truthfully, and truth is rare. He handed me a folder. We've been invited to partner with 3 universities to launch the Rise Again Fellowship. They want you to name it. I flipped through the pages: MIT, Columbia, Stanford. Call it unreplaceable, I said. Daniel smiled. Perfect. That afternoon, I met with the Women in Tech Mentorship Group. The room was full of laughter. Carla was coaching the new members on contract negotiation. Sam, now head of data at NovaSyn, shared lessons from his first year leading a team. And Tessa, the young engineer who once asked me, "How do you know when it's time to stand up?" was presenting slides on building a safe workplace culture. I listened quietly, warmth spreading in my chest. When they finished, I stood. You know, I said, the best part of success isn't the spotlight. It's when you can share that light with someone else. Carla chuckled. That sounds like a LinkedIn quote. Then post it, I said. Someone out there might need it. Late that night, an email arrived from Vance, VoltEdge's former attorney, now consulting for NovaSyn. Elena, you'll want to know, the court just approved compensation for former VoltEdge employees. Thanks to your documentation, many will receive fair restitution. Some battles end not in hatred, but in healing. Thank you for reminding me of that. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. Another circle had closed. One June morning, Daniel called me up to the rooftop. The Hudson wind was sharp, tangling his hair. He pointed across the river, at the old VoltEdge building, now owned by a small startup. Look, he said, the world never stops turning. Any regrets? I thought for a moment. No, I said. I don't regret walking through that fire. Otherwise, I'd never have known how strong I really was. He nodded. So what's next for you? I'm going to teach. Not in a school, here. I turned to him. I want to build a new kind of leadership. People who understand that power doesn't come from authority, but from how they treat others. Daniel smiled. If anyone can do that, it's you. A month later, I was appointed Chief Operating Officer of NovaSyn Analytics. At the internal ceremony, I kept my speech short. I'm not here to command. I'm here to make sure no one has to wait 12 years to hear the words thank you. Applause filled the room. Tessa wiped her eyes. Carla snapped photos. Sam whistled. I just smiled. I had enough titles, enough recognition, enough wealth, but what made me happiest were the people in that room. One quiet weekend evening, I sat down to draft my first book. On the first page, I wrote, I used to think value was something others gave you. Now I know. It's something you carve into time, one choice at a time. I paused, looked out the window. New York hummed as always, but inside me was a rare stillness, the kind that comes only after you've forgiven the past. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. You're still teaching me one last thing, Torres. Never underestimate the people you dismiss. M. I looked at the words and smiled softly. No bitterness, just closure. I replied, and I'm still learning that sometimes forgiveness is its own form of victory. The next morning, in NovaSyn's grand lobby, we unveiled a wall honoring the company's pioneers. Beneath the inscription, built by people who believed, rows of photos lined the wall. Not just mine, but everyone's who had walked the journey. I stepped closer, added one final line in silver ink beneath it. No one is replaceable when you build with respect. I stepped back and smiled. Morning light caught the metal letters, making them shimmer like a promise. It wasn't an ending, just another beginning for those who would come after and learn how to lead with value.